another video with your boy President Nice Kid, aka the full-time comedian. This is my event right here. I want everybody to please show up. Please show up to my event. If you guys like Playboy Cardi, Yeet, So Fago, and Uzi, you guys want to show up to this event, start mosh pits and have a really good time, alright? Let's get into the video. We got Most Powerful Gangsters Explained by Chris Explains. Like to subscribe.
Alphonse Capone, the undisputed king of Prohibition-era Chicago during the 1920s and early 30s. He transformed organized crime from a back-alley affair into a national enterprise, becoming America's most famous gangster. Capone's rise was fueled by the public's thirst for illegal alcohol. He cultivated a Robin Hood-like public image, opening soup kitchens for the poor, while secretly controlling a vast and violent criminal empire built on bootlegging and gambling. His organization, the Chicago Outfit, was known for its ruthless efficiency in eliminating rivals. The most infamous event was the 1929 Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 members of a rival gang were lined up against a wall and systematically eliminated. While the public saw him as untouchable, federal agent Elliot Ness and his team, known as the Untouchables, relentlessly pursued Capone. However, it wasn't his violent acts that would prove to be his downfall. The core of his power was his immense untaxed income. The federal government shifted its focus from his violent crimes to his finances, a brilliant and less direct method of prosecution that would change the fight against organized crime forever. Capone was never convicted for the many losses of life attributed to him. Instead, the turning point was his indictment for federal income tax evasion, a charge that finally stuck thanks to meticulous accounting evidence. The immediate consequence was his conviction in 1931. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, eventually ending up in the infamous Alcatraz, where his power and influence were completely neutralized. His health rapidly deteriorated in prison from neurosyphilis, a disease he had contracted as a young man. He was released after serving nearly 8 years, a broken man with severe cognitive impairment. Capone passed away from a cardiac event at his Florida home in 1947, a shadow of his former self. His legacy is the creation of the modern, highly organized crime syndicate that treats violence as a business tool. He proved that organized crime could generate a fortune rivaling legitimate corporations and forced the U.S. government to invent new methods of fighting it, establishing a blueprint for decades of conflict. Charles Lucky Luciano is widely considered the father of modern organized crime in America. Operating in New York City from the 1920s to the 1940s, he was a visionary who restructured the mafia into a smooth and efficient national organization. Luciano rose to power during the Castellamarese War, a bloody turf war between old-school Sicilian bosses. He saw their old-world feuds as bad for business and believed in a more cooperative and corporate structure for the criminal underworld. After orchestrating the losses of life of the 2 leading old-world bosses, Luciano's core act was the abolition of the boss of all bosses title. He instead established the Commission, a board of directors for the mafia. This board was composed of the heads of New York's 5 families and other major bosses from across the country. It was designed to mediate disputes, approve joint ventures, and regulate criminal activities, effectively ending the chaotic gang wars of the past. For years, the commission allowed the mafia to operate with unprecedented efficiency and secrecy. However, Luciano's high-profile operation of vice rackets drew the attention of ambitious special prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey. The turning point came in 1936 when Dewey successfully prosecuted Luciano, not for his most severe crimes, but for compulsory prostitution, a charge many believed was based on flimsy evidence. He was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. The direct result of his imprisonment was a power vacuum. However, during World War II, the U.S. government secretly enlisted Luciano's help from prison to secure New York's docks from sabotage, using his underworld connections. In exchange for his wartime assistance, his sentence was commuted in 1946. He was not freed, but was instead deported back to Italy, permanently barred from returning to the United States. Luciano continued to exert influence from abroad, attending a summit of American mob bosses in Havana, Cuba, before being forced back to Italy. He passed away from a cardiac event in Naples in 1962. His legacy is the Commission itself, a criminal version of the United Nations that stabilized the American mafia for over half a century, allowing it to become more powerful and profitable than ever before. Carlo Gambino was the antithesis of the flashy gangster. As head of the Gambino crime family from 1957 to 1976, he was a quiet, unassuming, and ruthless strategist who became one of the most powerful and respected bosses in American history. Gambino seized power by orchestrating the 1957 murder of his own boss, the notoriously violent Albert Anastasia. The public knew him as a quiet businessman, but in the underworld, this was a perfectly executed power play. Unlike bosses who focused on high-risk rackets, Gambino's core strategy was to infiltrate legitimate industries. He focused on controlling of construction, trucking, and the garment district, using labor union corruption to build a massive, low-profile empire. Under his leadership, the Gambino family became the most powerful of New York's 5 families. He was a master of manipulation, playing his rivals against each other while expanding his own influence and immense wealth. He was notoriously publicity shy, a lesson he learned from the disastrous Appalachian Meeting, a mob summit that was raided by police shortly after he took power. He understood that the secret to a long reign was to stay out of the headlines. For decades, the FBI tried to build a case against him. Despite constant surveillance and numerous attempts to prosecute him for racketeering, Gambino was a master at insulating himself from the criminal acts committed by his soldiers. The pivotal moment in his later years was the rise of more public figures like Joe Colombo, who started the Italian-American Civil Rights League. Gambino despised this publicity, correctly believing it would bring unwanted attention from law enforcement. The immediate outcome of his quiet strategy was his impressive talent for escaping prison. He was briefly jailed for contempt, but never served a major sentence for any of the serious crimes his family was responsible for. Carlo Gambino achieved what almost no other major boss ever did. He passed away from natural causes, a cardiac event, at his home in 1976, still in full control of his criminal empire. His legacy is the Gambino model of quiet infiltration and the avoidance of publicity. He was so effective that he became the primary target for a new generation of FBI agents, determined to finally dismantle the commission he expertly controlled. John Gotti, the head of the Gambino crime family from 1985 to 1992, was the polar opposite of his predecessor, Carlo Gambino. Dubbed the Dapper Don by the media, he was a charismatic, publicity-loving boss who became a national celebrity. Gotti seized power in a brazen public act. Believing his boss, Paul Castellano, was out of touch and weak, Gotti orchestrated to have him killed outside Spark Steakhouse in Manhattan in 1985, a major violation of Mafia protocol. The public was fascinated by Gotti's swagger. He was handsome, wore expensive suits, and held court at his social club in Little Italy. He became a folk hero to some, openly defying the government and cultivating a celebrity image. His core strategy was to intimidate witnesses and beat cases in court. He was acquitted in 3 high-profile trials in the 1980s, earning him a second nickname, the Teflon Don, because no charges would stick. However, Gotti's love for the spotlight and his constant talking were his undoing. The FBI bugged his social clubs and apartments, patiently recording thousands of hours of conversations, waiting for him to incriminate himself. The turning point was the loyalty of his underboss, Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano. After being arrested alongside Gotti and hearing a recording of Gotti disparaging him, Gravano decided to cooperate with the government. The swift aftermath was brutal for Gotti. Gravano's testimony was the ultimate betrayal, providing an insider's account of Gotti's direct involvement in numerous criminal acts, including the orchestration of Castellano's passing. The government finally secured a conviction in 1992. The Teflon Don was found guilty of extortion and 5 counts related to murder, and sentenced to life in prison without parole. John Gotti passed away in prison from throat cancer in 2002. His high-profile reign marked the end of an era for the American Mafia, proving that media attention was a fatal liability in the modern age of law enforcement. His flagrant disregard for secrecy and his celebrity status gave prosecutors like Rudy Giuliani the public support they needed to use powerful new RICO laws to dismantle the very commission he once led. Meyer Lansky was never the head of a traditional crime family, but his power was arguably greater. Known as the mob's accountant, he was a Jewish mobster and the financial genius who built the Mafia's international money laundering and gambling empires. Lansky's influence began with his childhood friendship with Charles Luciano. While Luciano was the visionary leader, Lansky was the brilliant strategist who understood the numbers. They formed a multi-ethnic partnership that valued profit over ethnicity. His core contribution was recognizing the massive potential of casino gambling. He was instrumental in establishing mob-controlled casinos first in Florida and New Orleans, and later on a massive scale in pre-revolution Havana, Cuba. When the Cuban Revolution forced the mob out, Lansky pivoted and became a key figure in funding and controlling the early development of Las Vegas, using union pension funds to finance the construction of major casinos. Lansky was a pioneer of offshore banking. He created a complex international network of shell corporations and Swiss bank accounts to hide the mob's immense profits from the IRS, making the money virtually untraceable. For decades, Lansky operated in the shadows, his true wealth and influence a subject of legend. The FBI and IRS pursued him relentlessly, but he kept no records and insulated himself from the day-to-day criminal acts. The defining moment occurred in the early 1970s. Facing a looming indictment for tax evasion, Lansky fled to Israel, attempting to gain citizenship under the law of return. It was a high-stakes gamble to avoid American prosecution. The direct result was his refusal of entry by Israel under U.S. government pressure. He was deported back to the United States in 1972 to finally face charges. In a final, stunning victory, Lansky was acquitted of the tax evasion charges in 1974 due to his failing health and the statute of limitations. He lived out his final years quietly in Miami, passing away from cancer in 1983. His legacy is the financial architecture of modern organized crime. He transformed the mafia from a group of thugs into a sophisticated international business, proving that the man who controls the money is often more powerful than the man who controls the firearms. Frank Lucas was a new kind of crime lord who shattered the mafia's dominance in 1970s New York. As an independent operator from Harlem, he built a massive criminal enterprise by cutting out middlemen and sourcing illicit substances directly from Southeast Asia. Lucas learned the trade as the driver and right-hand man for Harlem's legendary gangster Bumpy Johnson. After Johnson's passing, Lucas saw an opportunity to break from tradition and build his own organization, independent of the Italian mafia. His core innovation was a direct supply chain. He established connections in Thailand and used military contacts to transport extremely pure substances directly to the U.S., often rumored to be in the coffins of fallen American soldiers. This allowed him to sell a higher quality product, which he branded Blue Magic, at a lower price than his competitors. His operation was so efficient and profitable that even the mafia was forced to buy from him. Lucas lived a lavish lifestyle, famously wearing a $100,000 chinchilla coat to a prize fight. It was this public display of wealth that drew the attention of a determined New Jersey detective named Richie Roberts. Roberts assembled a special task force that began to systematically dismantle Lucas's network. They focused on his financial trail and turned key members of his organization into informants, slowly closing the net around him. It was in 1975 that everything changed when authorities discovered a massive cash stash at his residence. Facing overwhelming evidence, Lucas was convicted and sentenced to 70 years in prison. The instant result of his extended sentence was his decision to assist the authorities. To reduce his sentence, Lucas provided information that led to the conviction of over 100 corrupt police officers and other figures. He was released after just 5 years in custody. His life story was later immortalized in the book and major motion picture American Gangster, turning him into a legendary figure of criminal ingenuity. Frank Lucas passed away in 2019. His legacy is that of a brilliant and ruthless entrepreneur who broke the mafia's monopoly, demonstrating a new model for a vertically integrated international illicit substance trafficking organization. Vito Genovese.
It's like, bro, y'all doing some of the heinous crimes and getting famous for it. And then you were sentenced to 70 years in prison? That's crazy. We're finna do Pablo Escobar, and that's gonna be it. I'm only doing the ones that I know.
Pablo Escobar was not a traditional mob boss, but the world's most powerful illicit substance trafficker. As leader of the Medellin cartel in Colombia from the 1970s to 1993, he built an empire of unimaginable wealth and waged a violent war against the state. Escobar began as a petty street criminal, but quickly recognized the booming American demand for mind-altering substances. He built a vertically integrated organization that controlled every step of the process, from production to distribution. At the height of his power, his cartel was supplying an estimated 80% of the illicit substances smuggled into the United States. His core business generated billions of dollars, making him one of the wealthiest men in the world. He was known for his plata o plomo policy, meaning silver or lead. Officials who could not be bought with bribes were targeted for elimination. This strategy plunged Colombia into a period of intense, narco-fueled violence. His organization was responsible for thousands of losses of life, including police officers, judges, politicians, and civilians. One of the most heinous acts was the bombing of a commercial airliner in an attempt to target a presidential candidate. The tipping point for Escobar was the campaign against the extradition treaty with the United States. He launched an all-out war against the Colombian government to avoid facing American justice. The direct result of this war was a strange deal. Escobar agreed to surrender but was allowed to build his own luxurious prison, La Catedral, from which he continued to run his empire. When authorities moved to transfer him to a real prison, he simply walked away, triggering one of the largest manhunts in history. The search, involving Colombian and U.S. forces, ended in 1993 when he was located and taken down on a Medellin rooftop. His passing marked the end of the Medellin cartel's dominance, but it did not end the trafficking trade. His downfall allowed the rival Cali cartel to rise and take over the routes he once controlled. Pablo Escobar's legacy is a complex one. He was a ruthless narco-trafficker who terrorized his country, yet he is still viewed as a Robin Hood-like figure by some in his hometown for the community projects he funded, a testament to his calculated public image. Griselda Blanco, known as the Godmother, was a Colombian trafficker and a pioneer.
Alright, I don't know who the hell that is. Alright, man, what do you guys think about this in the comment section below? Please let me know, like, subscribe. Thank you guys for watching so much.